The sun was already low over the Montana plains when Elena Reyes finally stepped out of her battered Ford pickup and stared at the gate of the Triple Bar Ranch. Dust clung to her, boots in the hem of her jeans, and the wind whipped her dark hair across her face. She was 28, city-raised in Denver, and the only thing she knew about cattle came from the steaks she used to order. Medium rare. But the lawyer's letter had been clear. Her grandfather, a man she'd never met, had died and left her this place. 6,000 acres, 300 head of Black Angus, and a mountain of debt. The ranch foreman, Wyatt Callahan, was waiting for her on the porch of the main house. He was taller than she expected, 34 maybe, sun-browned and lean, with shoulders that looked like they'd been carved from the same cottonwood that lined the creek. His hat was pushed back just enough to show pale scars across his forehead, and his eyes were the color of winter sky, cold until they weren't. "You're late," he said, voice flat, like he'd already decided she wouldn't last a week. "I had to find the place first," Elena answered, hauling her duffel from the truck bed. "GPS thinks Montana is optional." He didn't smile, just turned and walked inside, expecting her to follow. The house smelled of wood smoke and old leather. Saddles hung on the walls like trophies. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, even though it was only September. Wyatt dropped a stack of papers on the kitchen table. "Bank's calling the note in 60 days, he said. "Your granddad borrowed heavy to buy replacement heifers after the blizzard 2 years back. Grass is thin, water's low, and half the herd's still up in summer pasture. We don't get them down and sold before snow flies. This place is gone." Elena felt the floor tilt under her. "I have a job. I'm a graphic designer. I thought I'd just sign some things, hire a manager." "You can't hire what you can't pay." He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted behind his eyes. "Not kindness, not yet, just recognition. You want to sell, I'll help you find a buyer. You want to try keeping it, you start tomorrow at 5. Your choice." She should have chosen selling. Any sane person would have. But something in the way he said "your choice," like it actually was, made her stubborn. "I'll stay 60 days, she said. Wyatt nodded once, as if he'd known what she'd picked before she did. The first week was punishment disguised as labor. She learned to ride well enough not to fall off, but every muscle screamed. Wyatt never raised his voice, never cursed her out the way the other two hands did when she left a gate open or spooked the horses. He just corrected her, quiet and relentless, the way a man trains a colt that still thinks kicking will get it somewhere. At night, she collapsed into the narrow bed in her grandfather's old room, boots still on, too tired to cry. Sometimes she woke to the sound of Wyatt moving around downstairs, feeding the fire, making coffee before dawn, the low murmur of his voice on the phone with the hay broker or the vet. He never slept more than 4 hours. She started setting her alarm for 4:30 just to prove she could keep up. On the 10th morning, they rode out to bring the herd down from the high pasture. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, wind cutting straight through her jacket. Snow had dusted the crazy mountains overnight, and the cattle were already restless. Halfway up the switchback trail, Wyatt's horse slipped on ice-slick granite. The gelding went down hard, rolling, and Wyatt came off like a shot bird. Elena saw it happen in slow motion, his body hitting shale. The crack of bone she felt more than heard. She was off her own horse before she thought about it, sliding down the slope on her knees. Blood poured from a gash above his eyebrow, bright against the dust on his skin. "Wyatt!" Her voice cracked. She pressed her gloved hand to the cut, trying to stop the bleeding. "Can you hear me?" He blinked up at her, eyes unfocused. "Leg," he rasped. She looked. His left knee was bent wrong, jeans already dark with blood where bone had torn through. "Shit! Shit!" Panic clawed up her throat. They were 6 miles from the ranch, no cell service, storm moving in fast. Wyatt's hand closed around her wrist, grip surprisingly strong. "Listen," his voice was thin but steady. "You got a splinted. Use the rifle scabbard in my belt. Then get me on your horse." "I can't." "You can." His eyes locked on hers, fierce even through the pain. "You will." She did, hands shaking, teeth chattering from cold and terror. She straightened the leg as gently as she could while he bit down on his own belt to keep from screaming. The sound he made when the bone slid back into place would live in her nightmares forever. Somehow, she got him into the saddle in front of her. His big body sagged against hers, dead weight, blood soaking through both their coats. The horse picked its way down the mountain slow as mercy while snow began to fall in thick, silent flakes. By the time they reached the ranch yard, the world was white, and Wyatt was burning with fever. The hands took one look and scattered, calling the air ambulance, firing up the generator, boiling water like it was 1890. Elena refused to leave his side. She sat on the floor of the bunkhouse infirmary while the flight nurse started IVs and wrapped the leg in a temporary cast. Wyatt floated in and out, mumbling her name like a question. When the chopper finally lifted off into the storm, she stood in the yard with snow filling her boots and realized she was crying. Not pretty crying. Ugly, snot-nosed, chest-heaving sobs that tasted like terror. 2 weeks later, he came back on crutches, knee rebuilt with titanium, face still pale under the tan. The bank had extended the note, another 30 days, because the story of the city girl who saved the foreman's life made the local paper. People sent cards. Someone dropped off a casserole. Elena hated every minute of the attention. Wyatt found her in the barn the day he returned, trying to fork hay with hands blistered raw. "You shouldn't be doing that," he said. "I'm fine." She wanted to argue, but the fight went out of her when she saw the way he was looking at her, like she was something rare and breakable and his all at once. "I thought you were going to die up there," she whispered. "I thought so, too." He set the fork aside and reached for her, slow enough that she could have stepped back. She didn't. His hand cupped the back of her neck, thumb brushing the place where her pulse was hammering. "Elena!" She rose on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was 2 weeks of fear and exhaustion and something fiercer pouring out all at once. His mouth was hot, tasting of the pain pills he still took at night, and he kissed her back like a man who'd been starving. They didn't make it to a bed. The hayloft was closer. He sat on a bale with his good leg braced and pulled her down to straddle him, mindful of the crutches leaning nearby. She was shaking again, but not from cold this time. "Tell me to stop," he said against her lips. "Say it and I will." She answered by pulling his shirt open, buttons scattering like hail. His skin was fever-warm under her palms, scars and muscle, and the faint rasp of chest hair. When her hands went to his belt, he caught her wrists. "Elena." His voice was rough. "I'm not. Gentle's not really my thing. Not after everything." She looked him straight in the eye. "Please," she whispered. "Be gentle." Something broke open in his face. He kissed her slow then, reverent, like she was the first soft thing he'd touched in years. His hands, those big, calloused hands that could break a bronch or set a broken bone, moved over her with a tenderness that made her throat ache. He undressed her the way a man unwraps something holy, lips following fingers, learning every inch. When he laid her back in the hay, the scratch of it against her bare skin barely registered because his mouth was on her breast, her stomach lower, until she was arching off the blanket he'd spread beneath them. She came the first time with his name caught in her throat, fingers twisted in his hair. He watched her like she was a miracle, then kissed his way back up her body and slid inside, her slow enough that she felt every inch, every heartbeat. They moved together, careful and deliberate, mindful of his knee, mindful of the fragile thing blooming between them. When he finally let go, burying his face in her neck, she felt the shudder that went through him and held on tighter. Afterward they lay tangled in the hay, snow ticking against the tin roof. His fingers traced idle patterns on her spine. "I'm selling my condo in Denver," she said into the quiet. He stilled. "You don't have to do that." "I want to." She lifted her head to look at him. "I want to stay. With the ranch. With you. If you'll have me." Wyatt's answer was to kiss her until neither of them could breathe. 60 days turned into 6 months. The bank got paid from the sale of the cull cows and a government grant. Elena found buried in agricultural paperwork. Spring came early, greening the pastures. The first calf of the season was born on a warm April night. and Wyatt carried Elena out to the barn still, half asleep to see it stand on wobbly legs and nurse. They got married in June under the cottonwoods by the creek. Just the two of them, and the preacher, and the hands who'd become family. She wore a simple white dress and boots. He wore the same black hat he'd had on the day she arrived, but he took it off when he kissed her. That night, in the big bed that had once been her grandfather's, he made love to her slow and thorough, whispering against her skin that he'd spend the rest of his life being gentle when she asked, and not a damn bit gentle when she didn't. Outside, the Montana wind moved through the grass like a promise kept, and the Triple Bar Ranch, against all odds, endured.